So I'm Ellen. I think you guys know that. But I like diving, and that's a picture of me diving. So I want to talk today a little bit about my background, just so you guys like know who I am, and then a little bit about like the co-ops that I did while I was at DAAP, and then also like my day-to-day at Level right now, which is where I work. So definitely want to talk like a lot about like where I've worked and like how I got to like where I'm at now. And then I also want to briefly talk about women in design because that's like a mission that's like really close to like Level, and something that like we do a lot with at work. And then also just some like life hacks and like tips and tricks and things. So my background, I grew up in Cleveland Heights. It's like a suburb outside of Cleveland, and it's like a really like sort of like hippie, diverse community that I just like loved growing up in. And I sort of thought in high school that like everyone was just like creative, and that was just like everyone was creative, and then learned later that's like not the case. But when I was in high school, I loved science and math. It was like pretty obvious that I was going to be an engineer. And like I would build like model bridges and like took like calculus and like, yeah, just like loved STEM sort of things. So I went to Georgia Tech because they have really good engineering programs. And since I'm also a diver, they have really good like platform diving. And so that's where I started college, but I came in with a lot of AP credits and I decided to just like try out industrial design. And I loved industrial design, and that's, I'm like so happy that I found it. It was just like perfect for what I wanted to do because it was like some of like the science and math stuff that I love, but then like some of like the creativity that, I had. So I didn't love studying at Georgia Tech in the South. It just like wasn't for me and like wasn't, I think, like the right environment. So I transferred to Cincinnati, which is like perfect because I'm from Ohio and I love being in Ohio. And so I got to still dive because like Cincinnati's big enough where I could dive on our team and then also do DAAP at the same time. So after DAAP and all my co-ops, I've ended up at Level. So this is where I work, and I love where I work, but I'm going to talk about that later and how I got there. So I'm going to start with my co-ops. So I used like all 5 of my co-ops for like different places. So the first place I went was Fossil in Dallas. And then after that, I went to Pensar, which is in Seattle, and they're like more engineering based, but they still do like industrial design consulting. And then pretty much after that, everything I did was in consulting. So then I went to Herbst Product, and that's in Santa Cruz. So it's like an hour-and-a-half drive, like south of San Francisco. But because San Francisco is big, it's still like the Bay Area. And then next, I went to Level, and that's in San Francisco. And then my 5th co-op, I worked at New Deal Design, which is also in San Francisco. So a little bit about Fossil. So I think I got the job at the time because I had like a lot of soft goods in my portfolio, or some soft goods, and also like a lot of just like very aesthetic based projects, which is I think something that they look for. And so the day-to-day at Fossil is like I did a lot of Illustrator, and so you'd like illustrate watch dials in Illustrator, and we did a lot of like ID specs. So you like spec out the watch and like all the CMF for it, and you'd send that to factories. We did a bunch of like inspiration finding. So I did spend a lot of time on like Pinterest and then like WGSN, like trend hunting. And then everyone there does an intern project. And Fossil's sort of broken up into like a lot of different groups. So there's like the Fossil brand, but then they also have like other brands that they do that are like their portfolio brands. And so those are things like Kate Spade and like Michael Kors, I think, and just like stuff like that. But depending on like what team you're on, you spend more or less time on an intern project. And I spent probably 50% of my time, maybe more, on an intern project. And I did sort of like an analog or a smartwatch that looks analog. And so that ended up being fun, and like I did learn a lot. But while I was there, I learned that like corporate wasn't really for me. I felt like sort of limited just doing watches, and I would get like bored at work because like I was just searching for like inspiration images, and I think I'm like maybe a little too like engineering oriented just to do like watch faces. And so it just like wasn't for me. But I still had like a good time there, and like I liked all the people that I worked with and all the other interns. And I'd say Fossil, like they look for like people with like really good aesthetic senses. So like people who have like great like inspiration images, and maybe people who like do a little bit of like trend research or have like some soft goods in their portfolio. So that's Fossil. And then the next place I worked was Pensar. And Pensar is like, I guess, sort of almost the opposite of Fossil because they do like tons of engineering things, which is really fun because we got to like collaborate with engineers directly. And I think they probably liked my portfolio at the time because I had like a few sort of like breakdowns of like, I don't know, like internals on products, and like I had a pretty big like range in my portfolio, and they do consulting, so just like worked out there. But day to day there, I did like a lot of CAD and a lot of CAD surfacing, and so I would sort of like update a CAD model, and then I like sat next to an engineer who was working on the project that I would work on, and I would like show him my CAD model, and he would like tell me like, oh, you need to like update this because of the draft angle, or like you need to update that because like we're putting like a fan over here, and like it was just like fun to be able to go like back and forth between just like us and the engineers, and so that was like a fun team to be on. I also got to do a little bit of like user testing, where we would like set up like sort of like trials with like prototypes and then watch like, I don't know, like a sample set of users like interact with it. And that was cool. And Pensar does probably a little bit more medical things than I like. I get like a little queasy, so that wasn't really for me. But Pensar's in Seattle. I love Seattle. Seattle's like a really, really cool city. And it almost feels somewhat Midwestern, which I like. So people are like generally friendly. And Pensar also has a really fun work culture. They like make a point to have a good work-life balance. And they like, I don't know, like they have like beer on tap with like a special tap system that they like engineered, and it's like in their wall, and like I think they have like unlimited paid time off, but they like expect that you're like working at the office. So I did like working there, and I think they just are generally looking for talented people. And then I think people also that just like fit with the projects that they have on hand sometimes. So the next place I went was Herbst Product. And Herbst is, I think like our aesthetic senses, like Herbst Product and mine were like really close at the time. Things that we did were like just somewhat similar, and I had some like consumer electronics in my portfolio, and Herbst Product does a lot of consumer electronics. So we meshed like really well. And so Herbst Product is owned by Scott Herbst, and he's from Chicago, and Herbst Product is like a really, really small firm. So it's really like Scott Herbst, and at the time I was really the only other person in the office, and then we had one other designer working remotely from Colorado, and I think he now has 2 other full-time people on the team, like in Santa Cruz, so it's slightly larger than when I was there, but it was so small, and like Scott and I got along like really, really well, and so like I had like a really, really good time at Herbst Product. Is probably my favorite co-op. So like day to day we did like everything. Like I got to be a part of like every part of the process. So we would do like sketching and CAD and rendering, and we would Photoshop things, and we would draw things in Illustrator, and we would, like he had a 3D printer, we would 3D print a bunch of stuff. I got to make prototypes. Like he had like sewing machines on hand if we needed them. And we had like really fun clients. I think we did 10 projects, and I was there for like 10 weeks because it was a summer co-op. So we just did like a ton of stuff. And I got to like meet a lot with clients and speak with them, which is like something that I don't think you always get to do as an intern, because usually like the teams are larger and there's sort of more people in the room and you don't always end up talking as much. But like here I got to, and that was pretty cool. And so I actually learned that I liked the smaller sized things because I just got like a lot more responsibility. And that's something that I like. But it was also like a lot of independence. Like I would just get to like contribute concepts, and like sometimes no one would like, you know, look at them and tell me that they were bad. I could just like throw them out into the world, which is something some people like and something some people don't like. But it's like a really good place for like traditional industrial design. So then the next place that I worked was Level. And so I think Level was working on a few fitness products that are currently on the market, like Tempo, for example, if you guys have ever heard of that. So they were working on that at the time that I got hired, and I think maybe one of like the motivations in hiring me was that I had like a lot of experience as an athlete. And so I sort of like fit for the projects that they had on hand. And they were also working on a few, I'm not going to say medical projects, but like health-based products. So things like heart rate monitoring and yeah, things along that track. And I had a few things in my portfolio where I like studied that. So I think that pretty much worked out for me. But day to day, I also did a lot of everything at Level. I got to do CAD models, I got to sketch a lot, and we would all sort of sit around a table together and sketch. And then we have like a war room, and right now it's a digital war room. But we would like sort of pin up a bunch of sketches and sort of like organize boards and move things around. It was very like collaborative. Like as an intern, like very much like my opinion was always like heard and valued, which was nice. Also, I got to do a lot of prototyping. I like making things, so like that was like pretty much left up to me. And that's pretty cool. And then we also had like a lot of good clients again while I was there. I think Level just like has good relationships with people around the Bay Area. And so I think while I was here, I sort of realized that like Level was like the perfect size for me. And there's also like just great people who work there. Like we very much vibed, like everyone loves like food, and I like love cooking and food, so like that just like meshed. I don't know. We also like, I learned a lot there too about just like technical skills. Like I had really good like mentorship, so like everyone was like always teaching me like the fastest way to do something in Illustrator, like how to properly model like curvature continuous things in CAD. And so I really like enjoyed being at Level. And working out here now, I can say like Level is like always looking to hire like a diverse group of people. they always make sure people are like meshing really well with like the team that we have currently. And I think those are like two of the more important things. Oh, and we also look for really good like specific aesthetics and styling. A lot of the things we do are like pretty simple and minimal and clean, and we look for that too. But after New Deal, I think I sort of knew that I wanted to stay around San Francisco. And so for my last round of co-ops, I was super risky, and I think I only applied to like 5 places, which is really not a good idea and would not recommend it, because I was like so stressed because I was like, no one's gonna hire me. But New Deal hired me, which was good. But that was like, don't do that. So I think New Deal, I had been around like the Bay Area for like my last 2 co-ops, and I did like a lot of networking around San Francisco. So I actually knew quite a few people who worked at New Deal when I got hired at New Deal. And New Deal and their interns, I think, looks for people who are like graduating and that they can like hire full-time potentially afterwards. So that definitely like worked in my favor when I did it, because that was my last co-op. And as you can see, like with the screenshot that I took here, New Deal is like, they're quirky, and they like to do things a little bit differently than like the rest of the design world sometimes. So even now they do like a ton of sketching, and like that's like a lot of the design process at New Deal. And I will say, when I was there, we had one creative director, and I now have a new different creative director. So some of the things I'm saying have like probably shifted between the time I was there and now. We did like tons of sketching, and they're owned by Gadi Amit, and he's sort of like the main guy that like everything you do sort of gets approved by him. And he's, I'm not gonna say he's an older designer, but like he's been around for a while. He loves sketching. Like we would sketch on like tracing paper with colored pencils sometimes, and that was just like sort of expected. So it was like a different skill that I learned. I did like a little bit of CAD, a little bit of gathering inspiration, a little bit of talking to clients. But I will say, like day to day, I probably spent the most time sketching. And I really liked the people that I worked with at New Deal. But I think for me, it was a little bit bigger of a team than I like really wanted to be on. I think it was like 30 people maybe. And sometimes I think, like as an intern especially, like the tasks that I got felt like very directed to me, which is definitely like really good for some people. And like I know a lot of people who've like absolutely loved working at New Deal. But I think I like really valued the independence I had at my last 2 co-ops. So it was like, I felt like I had a good like culture fit with the team, and like generally enjoyed what I was doing, but just like wasn't like right for me to like be there full time. But it was definitely a great learning experience. I don't know. I think they just look for like fun, quirky people with like really good portfolios. So now I'm going to talk a little bit. So that was like all my co-ops. I'm going to talk a little bit about Level and how I got here. So this is a funky photo because I was going through my phone and trying to find photos to talk about. And I found this one, and this is from Level's last holiday party, which was in 2019 because 2020 was COVID. But there's like me, I'm in the bottom right corner, and I got invited to the holiday party, and then they were taking like a team photo, and they were like, Ellen, like come be in our team photo. But like I hadn't even like talked to them really about like going full time, but I had like stayed like in really good touch with everyone on the team. So I was like seeing them frequently, even though I was like working at New Deal at the time. And so definitely like stay in touch with past co-ops. even if it's just like, I don't know, sometimes I'll email like people I've worked with in the past and I'm just like, life update, like I'm moving, or like I'm working here now, or I just finished a project, like take a look. So that, I'm sure that like played a role. And so I'd say day to day now is definitely like different from my internship because we're remote. And right now I'm in Cleveland, but I work on San Francisco time. But Level does do a good job of like keeping in touch throughout the day, even though we are remote. So we do like a morning coffee every morning, and that's from like 9:30 in the morning San Francisco time. So our morning coffee is like at 12:30 this time. And then we also do like a afternoon check-in, which is an evening check-in for me. But that's like at 8:30, and then we almost always do a brainstorm in the afternoon where we just like sit together and sketch. And we use like an app called Millinote. It's just like a virtual board, and we all like drop sketches and inspiration images in, and we sort of like move things around and organize them. And so like even if we're not on the phone, you can sort of see sometimes what people are working on. And so I guess day to day still do like a lot of everything. Pretty much the whole team does brainstorms together. Sometimes I'll make prototypes, but prototypes are a little bit weird right now because we're all sort of virtual. So it's like, here, look what I made, but like you can't really touch it. Although sometimes we've been using like AR models. Like there's this like Adobe app right now that you can like upload a SolidWorks model to, and then it like goes to your phone, and then you can like see it on the camera, like in a room, like in wherever you're at. And so that's been pretty fun. And then I still do like a lot of CAD. And a lot more CAD for like manufacturing things than when I was an intern. And then we do a lot of Illustrator as well, just to like get dimensions. We do a lot of client meetings because we do like to keep in touch with our clients, especially like virtually, to make sure that like everyone's on the same page. And then I also do ID specs for manufacturing. And so I will say, like, between when I worked at Level and now, Level's definitely grown. So Level is 4 years old now, and when I was there, they were 2 years old. So they're definitely like a newer consultancy. But like in those 2 years, they really like honed in like how to like time manage better, how to like manage all their projects. They're like they're like very much like considerate, not that they weren't before, but like very considerate of like work-life balance. We've like acquired some like really cool clients in the past few years that I've gotten to work with. And yeah, I think especially now being full-time, I get to like communicate with clients a little bit more. And that's sort of a fun part of being a full-time designer. And then I think like the biggest thing is that I had to realize that like, I'm still a junior designer. Like I don't know everything, and there's still like so much more to learn. It's not like you graduate and you're like ready to go, ready for anything. There's like still like tons to learn, which was sort of a cool realization. And so I think like why I picked Level is that it was just like just right for me. I sort of did like a Goldilocks with my co-ops. Like I started at like, I loved Herp's product, but it was sort of maybe too small for me to like really grow there. And I tried New Deal, and it was maybe a little bit bigger than I wanted, but like Level was like really the perfect size for me. And I think like sort of the mission that Level has and like what I like to do, everything just like really, like our values really align. So I really like my job. And something that Level is like super passionate about is like women in design. So Level is like a woman-led company. Nicole Ruliak is our like creative director and founder, and she started San Francisco's chapter of Women in Design. And I think it's just like her mission to like make sure that like if women want to design consumer electronics, that there's like a space for us in like the consulting world and like in the design world. So she does a lot of like work on that, and it's been really cool because I get to like participate in like any of the events that are happening, which was really fun. But I will say, like, she actually made this graphic. Like, there's sometimes like a point where like as a woman in design, you like are sort of the only woman in the room, and it's definitely like a little bit of a weird feeling, especially when you're the only one. And then sometimes you're like, oh, am I like even like welcomed here? And I'd say like my advice for that is like try and find a place that you're welcomed. Like there's this image here. This is a specific design team in San Francisco, and like as you can see, there are no women in the photo, and that's like it's a little off. And as a design firm that I applied to work at like multiple times, and I think by my 5th co-op, I was just like, you know, actually like don't want to work here because like I don't think that they like really want me to work here or like want to accept me, which is like sort of like a sad bit of advice, but I think there's like a lot of places that are really accepting, and I think things are definitely changing for women in design, which is really a good thing. It's like find places that are accepting and nice, hopefully. But this Women in Design organization in San Francisco is super cool, and I'm seeing like more and more like support for women in design and like support for like minority groups in design, and it's like really, really cool to see all of these like things pop up, and like I don't know, like there's one in Chicago and San Francisco, and like IDSA now I think has like a women in design like specific like section, and I will say that like I am talking about like women in design, but like guys in design should like, I don't know, feel like part of this mission too. And I know like whenever we had like women in design events, like I would invite like all my friends to come, because I think sometimes it was nice to have like some men in the room too, to just like say, or just sort of like hear what's happening and like be supportive too. And so I think it's just like, I mean, it is obviously like women in design, but I think it's like sort of a mission for everyone, because, you know, when you include more and more groups in design, you're getting better designers and you're getting more diverse designers. And, you know, as designers, we're designing, you know, all of these products, and like it's better to have sort of everyone's opinion when you're designing for everyone rather than like, you know, like a subset. So I don't know, I love women in design. And this picture is from like a mentorship event that I got to go to. And so it's also just like groups like this are like a really good place to meet people. And that goes for like anyone who wants to like attend events like this. It's just like a good networking opportunity. It's pretty cool. And that brings me to my section of like life hacks and like tips and tricks. So these are just like sort of random pieces of advice that I like used or found helpful, like to get me to like where I'm at now. So I'd say like brand yourself. And so this is something that ended up being somewhat easy for me, because I dove in college, and that's part of my brand. I remember, I think it was my first co-op, I was making my resume, and my dad was like, why don't you like put like a diver on your resume? Like it would be really cool to just like, you know, show off like a little bit about like who you are. And I was like, that is a great idea. So I have this like little diver icon that I put places, and I like show myself diving. And then, I mean, because it is something I am passionate about, like I love being active. Like quite a few of my projects have like stemmed from like being an athlete or doing active things. And then this page is like sort of a reminder of like what to stress about and what not to stress about. For me, I'd say don't sketch or don't stress about sketches. Because sometimes like sketching just like takes so long and people get like really stressed out about it, and they'll like spend hours and hours like perfecting a sketch. And like I've done this too, but like sometimes those hours are like better spent like, I don't know, perfecting your portfolio or like doing something else. So just like be selective about what you're stressing about. And then I'd say like the most important decision I made in DAAP was to like keep diving throughout college, because when I actually transferred to Cincinnati, I didn't know if I would still be able to dive, like if I would have like the time or energy. But I decided to do it anyway, and like I love diving. It's like one of my favorite things. And it's something I still do now, like for fun. And I think it's like sort of kept me sane. But along with that, I would say take breaks, like do other things for fun that are not DAAP. Because when you like only do DAAP, you'll go insane. And you'll actually be like less productive because you're just like unhappy, like just focused on one thing. And I think when you like sort of add in extra things that you really enjoy, it's just gonna like make you happy and make you like ready to like do design work that you like too. And like these are like me doing mostly a bunch of like active things, but like social things count too, like just going to like hang out with a friend is like good idea. And so this, I was going through my phone photos and I found all these. It was right before COVID happened, but these are my friends David and Ben and Michael Rice, and we were all outside because David and Ben were like shooting their capstone outside, and they did like a bunch of like photography cameras. It's like a really cool project. But like we were all just like sort of like goofing off and like having a fun time, and like I don't know, just try and have fun, I guess. And like yeah, especially be fun, like friends with your classmates, things like that. And then this is sort of my reminder to like have good relationships with your coworkers, like make friends at work. Which I think some people like don't always make friends at work. They're like, oh, like this is work and like this is my social life. But for me, I think like being really friendly with my coworkers worked really well. And as I was like scrolling through my camera roll, I realized that like 2 of my co-ops like baked me cakes or like made me cakes like when I left. And I thought that was just like really fun. And like, I don't know, like one of them like has a diver on it because like they knew that I loved diving. And like I felt like really close to all my coworkers, and like I still keep in touch with them. And like, I don't know, this is like a barbecue that I had in San Francisco, like the second time I was there, and I like invited all my old coworkers. It was just like a lot of fun. And so these are 2 of my coworkers now that I took photos of while I was on internship, because we designed these like smart glasses and we like went to go try them on. But this is Nicole, who founded Level, and then on the right is John, and they're like sort of like my bosses. They do all like the creative direction for Level, but I've like probably learned like the most from them out of like anyone in the design world, and they're like really, really good mentors and really, really good friends, and so I just like feel lucky to have them. And definitely like learn from your coworkers and like pick their brains because they're awesome. And then I just wanted to talk about like working remotely. And it's sort of like some of my same tips from like in real life. Like talk to your coworkers, which I know is like super hard when it's like over Zoom or like Teams or whatever. But like the more you stay in touch, the better. So like my office, we like do a coffee huddle in the morning, and we do like a daily design sync every day. And then on Fridays, we always have like a happy hour, which is quarantine-y. And then actually this was like a special happy hour, but they like sent everyone like cocktail kits. And it was just like, it's good to like keep in touch, especially like now being super remote. I feel like some of my social life is like keeping in touch with my coworkers. And so those are like my working remotely tips. And I think that's all that I have for you guys today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was fantastic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone who's here, it's opened up for questions. If you have any, feel free to ask them. As long as you still have a little time on your hands.
Yeah, I have time. I'm happy to like just chat too, or like whatever.
Awesome.
I have a quick question. You like didn't talk about your capstone process too much. I was wondering if you had anything to say or anything you would recommend when initially starting your capstone, which I think is your 4th year.
Yeah.
For some of our 3rd years. Yeah.
Yeah, you do start like the semester before your capstone semester, so it's like 2 semesters of capstone. And the first semester is pretty much just figuring out like what you want your capstone to be. And I will say most people don't figure out what they want their capstone to be. I'd say like 90% of people change what they're gonna do like in between the 2 semesters. It would be like way more efficient if you like didn't change between the 2 semesters, but most people did. I did. I thought I wanted to do like a speculative design project, which is just like not me as a designer. Like I don't do speculative design. And so like in the co-op between like the first capstone semester and the second capstone semester, I was like, I need to figure this out. And one of my coworkers at New Deal, he was like, what are you doing for your capstone? And I was like, I don't know, like I have no idea. Like I wanted to do this like stupid speculative design project, but like I'm not doing that. And he was like, well, like, you know, like, well, what do you like to do? And I was like, well, like I've been working out a lot recently. And he was like, do something with like working out. And I was like, oh, I could design like really nice gym equipment. And then that was my capstone. And then like that co-op, I ended up like, I did actually have to spend some time like researching things because it was like a big project that like you probably shouldn't try and do in one semester. I mean, it is possible. A lot of people did that, but maybe not the best idea.
What was the like speculative path you were going down? What was that area like?
I don't even know. What was I doing? I can't even explain it. It was just like not a good idea. Is like where we landed. It was like, yeah, just don't do that. Unless you're good at speculative design, and then do speculative design. Yeah.
All right. Noted for the future.
I had a quick question about, well, I had a couple questions, but one of them was just being in like San Francisco and kind of being in like a hub where there's so many different consultancies. You know, that part of the United States kind of runs, well, recently like has been running like consumer tech related stuff. Like, just curious to hear about what that environment is like. Is there like a competitive nature between different consultancies? And then the other question I had was being at a consultancy, like everybody always has a part of design that they're like interested in doing, like soft goods or accessories, consumer tech. But have you ever worked on a project that like was not something you were quite interested in at level, except like it turned out being like really exciting or fun, or you learned something new from designing something you're not interested in?
Yeah. So I will say, like, working in San Francisco, it is definitely a design hub. And like, I'd almost describe it as like DAAP on steroids. It's like a giant DAAP. Like, you know, like your class is 80 people, but it's like 1,000 people, and everyone like knows each other. And like there's like so many different like cross connections of like people, like, and I just say like in the like 2 co-ops I was there, I probably met like 100 people, like just so many people. And it's like, it is pretty funny, like it is definitely competitive, but people are still friendly. Like it's like, oh, like you're also a designer, like you work here and I work there, and like we're all friends. It is like,
nice to hear.
Yeah, it is weird though, because I think so many other cities you'll like go and you'll be a full-time designer, and like you might be friends with like lots of other people doing like different careers. And I'd say like the San Francisco design communities, it's pretty tight knit. Like I'd say like almost all my friends are designers in San Francisco, or if they're not designers, they're like people who were friends with the designers are like related to them. But I like that, so I'm happy there. And then what was your other question?
It was if you ever ended up like designing a product or working on a project that wasn't necessarily what you were interested in, but turned out to provide you with some fun or cool experience.
Okay, I'm not gonna say about level and specifically. There was a project we did at New Deal, and it was sort of about like dental care and like retainers. And I was like, this is just like not gonna be interesting. But like it was, like, I mean, there's just, I think, always like a design problem to solve that like you don't really think about, especially in like a market like that. Like no one's like really designed like a nice like retainer case, for example, and it's like, oh, like maybe we could like design something that's nicer. So I think stuff like that does end up being pretty fun. Like it's like not glamorous to start off with, but then like in the end you're like, oh, like this is really cool.
I have a couple questions. I was curious, you did do a lot of co-ops in a lot of major cities and everything, and I was wondering, how was it to find housing, and how many companies kind of offered free housing? And if free housing, how would you look for it?
So I'd say like nowhere that I worked offered me housing. I know some companies do, and I've had friends that either get like a relocation stipend, so like $2,000 or $3,000 to relocate, or they'll have like company housing that's free. But I'd say it's not common. San Francisco, for example, is like super tricky to find housing, and it's gotten better, I think, during COVID a little bit, because a lot of people have like moved out of major cities. But when I was looking and things were like fully open, I spent a lot of time on Facebook groups. And that's pretty much where I found most of my housing. When I was in Seattle, I found it through the University of Washington Facebook group, and I found like a group of like 4 roommates that had like an open sublease, and I took the sublease. which like ended up being like perfect actually. Like, so I'd definitely say like check college housing pages for housing, and that like applies outside of really big cities. Like there's often, like if you're co-oping somewhere, there's like often a college nearby, and you can like look at their housing Facebook page, and like almost always you can find stuff, and then you're like almost guaranteed at least hopefully friends that are like normal people who are like also college students, and like I've like had really good luck with that. Yeah, and I'd also say reach out to people, like if you know anyone who's like co-opted somewhere before, like ask them where they've lived, which is something that like I did in San Francisco. So like the landlord that I rented from rents to like a bunch of DAAP kids, and like I reached out to him because like someone else had like rented from him before.
Also, I also have another question, and I was wondering about kind of not affiliated with design, but how much did you interact with business people and everything like that? And did you interact with, you know, people on like multi-levels, like internationally and everything like that? Did you receive any opportunities like that?
Yeah, so actually when I was at Fossil, I sat sort of next to like the marketing department. And so we didn't work with a ton with them directly, but because of like where I was sitting, I got to like hear a lot of like what they were doing. And then definitely anytime that we've worked with startups, we work a lot with like the business side of things, and sometimes like doing a little bit of like strategy or like a little bit of branding or a little bit of like sort of like recommending like markets and things to look into. But I also haven't had like a ton of experience doing like business and design. Sometimes like we'll learn a little, or I've learned a little bit about like design proposals, because like when you consult, you have to like write a design proposal for the client. That's just sort of like detailing like what work you'll be doing, and like the different phases, and like the time, and like how much you're going to be paid. And so I've seen a little bit of that, but like generally not a ton of like business things. And then working with people internationally, I've like occasionally worked with people internationally, which definitely comes into play like the more like the closer you get to like manufacturing a product. And like Level, for example, like we try to like be as involved in manufacturing as we possibly can, but like I think the nature of consulting is usually like you're there a lot of the time for like concept work and like getting like a CAD model ready, but then oftentimes the company that you're like working for is then like sort of responsible for all the manufacturing, which is like usually international. But like occasionally we'll like consult with like factories, or like tell them how to fix prototypes or mock-ups, and yeah. I think you're on mute. Cool.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
A long time no see, Ellen. So
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I do have a question for you. I know you've been to co-op in a lot of consultancy in San Francisco. I think the next semester I'm just going to do exactly the same thing as you do, like just only apply for 5 companies in there and try to eventually locate there after graduation. But I'm really just like wondering, because I think in your portfolio there's a lot of like model making, and indeed you're really good at it, and you did a lot of photography. I think that's one of the reasons your skills has been, you know, really appreciated by many companies, because they know you don't only have the ability to visualize something, you can also make them into the real thing, and you know about joining, fastening, manufacturing, all those stuff. So, but during the COVID time, we don't really have chance to make any modeling during this time. A lot of people, they're out of campus. Myself, yeah, also like right now I'm also working from home. And even though my company want me to do like prototyping, I'm not able to. There's also no any model making after that in my portfolio, which is really a shame. So I want to ask you, during this time, like all those consultancies, what do you think they are looking for in the candidate's portfolio? Like, what do they really cares about, and they like in terms of this current time?
I do think people are still looking for like the same things that they were looking for before. That being said, like I think if you're presenting a project that you did during COVID, I think it's totally okay to say like I usually would have made a model for this, but couldn't. And like people will understand that. That's like definitely not a problem. But I will say like people do a lot of like even just like actually I think I'm allowed to show this. I made this out of paper. Like it's printer paper and it like it's a mock-up of like and like stuff like that is like totally fine. And I think people like to see stuff like that too. Even if it's just like out of paper, out of cardboard. I mean, I guess pink foam is like a little bit more involved and difficult to do without resources, but like you could do it with like a handsaw and like some files if you wanted to. And so I'd still say like if you want to make prototypes, you should make some. But I do think people are still looking for like all the things that they are usually looking for. So like great renderings, great inspiration images, like a solid like showing of your process and like talking about like the research you did and sort of like how you got to like your final design. And then of course just like a killer like final design at the end. So I don't know. I wouldn't be afraid to make like silly prototypes.
I see.
Take out of paper.
Another question I want to ask you is I don't know, but did you find yourself do a lot of extra work in design consultancy? Because every like for instance in my company, all the invoices are based on hours, but most of the time you couldn't finish the work based on hours. So I found like all of us are actually like overworking during the Saturday, during the Sunday, just because we have to catch up with the deadline instead of what is actually in the invoice.
Yeah, consulting is a bit of a catch in that like you are working for not just an internal team, you're working for people outside of your team. So you're sort of like on their deadlines sometimes. So it definitely happens where like you end up really busy or you have like 3 or 4 projects going on at the same time and like you do end up working late or like you end up working on a Saturday. Level is like pretty good about sort of like making up for that. So like I don't know. I think there was a project where like we needed to finish it and like all of us ended up working on like a Saturday. But like the next week we ended up taking like a day off of work like as a studio. So like that like was really nice. But I know it's not that way everywhere. And like that is something to watch out for when you're like on co-ops. I mean like a co-op's like a great opportunity to like sort of figure out if like a place that you're working is gonna be like a ton of hours. And it's even something you can ask like in an interview if you're like really concerned about it. It's like, do you guys work a lot of hours? Do you guys work late? And a lot of people are pretty upfront about that.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, and some companies like are like really great. Like they have great work-life balances, especially like corporations. Like you'll usually find like a more normal work week, but consulting is a little flighty. Like you might have like 2 weeks where you're like hyper busy and then like 2 weeks where you're like sort of doing nothing. So it's like usually balances out.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. If anyone else has questions.
I have another quick question. I guess a problem that I sometimes run into is like getting distracted with side projects. Like sometimes when there's like a focus for this semester, like I'm currently in Chair Studio, but I can think of like other projects that I'm really stoked about. Like, have you run into that problem in the like becoming a full-time designer? And like, has there been room for you to like pursue some of those side projects? Has the company been supportive of it, or have you kind of just had to deal with that on your own?
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like recently I haven't really felt like doing any side projects, which I think has just been because I like have been busy at work and I've gotten to do like sort of the creative things that I want to do at work, and I feel like I'm like sort of happy there. But like Level is like pretty supportive of like anything that like I want to do like outside of work. So like I don't know, like I always like work out in the morning, and that's just like everyone knows that like that's what I do in the morning. Or I don't know if there are any like good examples. I did actually recently, we have a glass kiln in my basement right now, and I wanted to like cast glass, and I was telling my coworkers about that, and they were like pretty excited. So like they're definitely like, they're a good support structure. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Just curious about that. If anybody else feels similarly, I'm just always getting distracted by random things and makes the primary task difficult. But glad to know you're busy enough in the professional world to not get distracted.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's good to be distracted. Just, you know, if you like what you're doing and you want to do something cool, get distracted by it.
Also, I swam for UC for about 2 months, and I stopped, and before even the semester started. Yeah, I can't imagine diving through DAAP. Like that's
Oh, really?
the last. Yeah, that just seems practically impossible.
What year?
2018. I only in the summer though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for about a month and a half.
Oh, it's gone by then. Oh, cool.
I have a question. I guess just like regarding when you encounter moments of failure, or like you're hired in a job and there's something you run into that you're just not good at or unable to, you know, get up to speed with. How have you been able to deal with that in previous co-ops, and like what do you think is a good way to react? Yeah.
I think being like open about like not being ready for something is really important. So like, I don't know, I think my first co-op at Level, they like wanted me to do like a really nice rendering for a client, and they were like, the meeting's in like a half hour, like can you do it? And I was just like, no, like I can't, like I'm not, like I won't get you the rendering that you want in the next half hour. Like, well, I was like, I can try, like, but I just don't think that like my computer will like spit it out in time, and that like I'm gonna do it the way that you want it. And like at that point they're like, okay, that's okay, like we'll just like shift around and like someone else will do it. And like definitely just like don't tell people no. Like, I mean, like I said it like in a positive way. It was like, I don't think I'm gonna do it the way that you wanted me to do it, and like I'll try if you want me to, but like it might not be what you want. So like that's one approach. And then I'd also say like being, yeah, like if you don't know how to do something, like just ask, because like especially as an intern, like people are not gonna fault you for like not knowing how to do something. Like most often they're just gonna be like, oh, like that's okay, like next time I'll like set aside an hour and sort of like teach you what you need to know. So definitely like being upfront. And then I think like in school, when I've ran into problems like that, I'll like either spend like a bunch of time like Googling how to do something, or I'll like be really bothersome and ask a bunch of people. And And then I'd say like just like failure in general. I think I'm pretty good at seeing a point at which like to just like stop. Like with my capstone, for example, like I was like, I didn't get that attached to it. It was like, okay, this isn't working. Like I just have to do something else. And then like sort of knowing when to like drop something, even if like you have spent like a lot of time on it, saying like, okay, like that just failed, and like I'm just gonna spend my time like fixing it or like making something else that's like right and better. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well,
anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Want to ask? Cool. We're good.
all right. Well, oh, I'm seeing, maybe I'm not. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for putting together this whole presentation and spending some time with us.
Yeah,
really
for sure. It's really nice to talk to people who are at DAAP now.
Oh.
Thank you guys so much. Sorry you guys are online.
It will be over soon.
Make the best of it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Happy to talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna say goodbye then.
Sounds good. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.